Okay, we're starting on in the Name and Edition, page 94, which is Perek Revi'i, the fourth chapter, and we are on part 1 still. So that's part 1 and the fourth chapter, and we've been discussing so far obviously we started certain things about Hashem, and then we started talking about world history, and the last few classes we're talking about the body and the soul, that the human being is composed of these two opposite elements, the body, the guf, and the neshama, the soul. I just want to mention, last week, I don't think he's not here this week, Menachem mentioned that it sounds like the Rambam doesn't agree with the Ramchal in his explanation of world history. We learned that the Ramchal holds that the way world history works is that before the year 6000, Mashiach comes, and then there's Tchiyas HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. And then after that, after the year 6000, the world will be destroyed and recreated in a more spiritual world where both the human's body and soul will get its reward by being close to Hashem and being nena from Hashem. So the Rambam, he showed me, the Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim in 229, he learned, that's a Gemara that says that the world is going to exist 6,000 years and then be destroyed. So the Rambam seems to say that Gemara is a das yachid, it's a minority opinion, and really the world is going to continue the way it is. So exactly how does, and the Rambam of course holds of Tchiyas HaMesim, he wrote a whole letter about it because people misinterpreted what he wrote, and both the body and soul will be resurrected. But it sounds like what happens after Tchiyas HaMesim is different than the Rambam and the Ramchal. And if you look, David, if you look in Rav Weinberg's Sefer, Evan Shasiya, he has in the Yud Gimel Ikrim, he talks a little bit about this. I think it's just from reading the footnote, it sounds like he says the Ramban holds like the Ramchal in that. But that was just a little difference to point that out. Okay, so let's start. Let's start here. 4:1. When it comes to the person in this world, we have to be concerned with two matters. Or we have to examine two matters. Man's disposition and what his different components and his composition, and the place where he's put and everything that comes with it. So there's two things when we have to talk about human beings. One is the combination, the composition of a person, and two is the place where the person is put, meaning this world. So we're going to talk about a human and his relationship to the world. Beis. When it concerns man himself, when it concerning man's composition, we already mentioned how man, meaning women also, mankind, humankind, is composed of two opposites. The soul and the body. That we see that, sorry, I forgot to close out of everything, my apologies. We see that in these two things, the body and the soul, the body is the one that's more dominant in this world. And the effects of the body are very strong. After a person's born, he's almost completely physical. And his intellect only has a little bit of effect, right? A child, except in that movie Look Who's Talking, and Baby Geniuses, and other movies, usually children don't talk. And babies don't talk, and babies don't have any intellect. They're mostly physical. And as the child grows, his intellect grows and strengthens. Everyone according to their how they are. But nevertheless, even though we all grow up and we're no longer babies and we mature, nevertheless we are never free of the hold of physicality. We always have that drive for physicality, even though apparently it's more intense when one is a baby and a child. But when one becomes an adult, the power, the hold of physicality is still very strong. However, if he grows in wisdom, and he's learned in it, and he strengthens in its ways, he will strengthen himself to conquer his nature. And he won't abandon the reins of his desires from his hand, and he'll persevere to go in the ways of the seichel. So a person is born, the guf, the body, is totally dominant, and when he gets older, has more intellect, and he's able to not just be totally a slave to his bodily desires. However, it's still very strong, but he has to strengthen himself to overcome them. Right? Someone told me the mashal, the comparison, that life and the growth in spirituality is like walking up the down escalator. Right? If you don't keep walking up, then you're going to go down. Right? You always have, when it comes to physicality, naturally we are pulled to physicality. So we have to work to strengthen our spiritual side and to strengthen our intellect to be able to overpower that. One is not naturally able is not going to be naturally able to overpower his physical desires without practically working on it and putting in effort. Right? You have people that they go to the kotel for the first time and they get upset that they didn't feel anything. I was supposed to feel this, and the people never did anything spiritual in their life, so they think that they're gonna go to a holy place or something and just like magically feel spirituality takes work, just like anything good in life takes work, but especially spirituality. And according to what the Ramchal is saying, that's because we're in a physical world and we're composed of a physical body. So naturally, the physicality is much more strong in this world than the spiritual. So to strengthen the spiritual, one has to work. He says here, he brings the mashal, Rabbi Naaman, that it's like holding onto a horse in the reins, that if you let go of the reins, the horse is going to just naturally run away from you. You have to hold on to it and keep it under control. Okay. V'ulam, tochios hanyanim ha'ele, shanu roim, the core of what we're saying, that we see, hine hu shebemetzius ha'chaimer v'atzmuso nimtza ha'achiras v'choshech b'teva. In the physical world, we naturally see that it's cloudy, and it's dark. And it's very far away, and it's the exact opposite of those who want to get close to Hashem. And to cling to His holiness. Now, we're going to learn. Don't get afraid. This doesn't mean that for one to get in touch with Hashem, that he has to go and be a monk in the desert and fast and sit on a pole and just like do yoga and contemplate. The Ramchal is going to discuss how we get close to Hashem through the physical world. But the physical world in and of itself is the exact opposite of getting close to Hashem. Okay, V'haneshama atzma, the soul, right? The soul, the neshama specifically, there are different parts of the soul, but the neshama, that part of the soul, is the part which wants to cleave to Hashem, that wants to have a connection with spirituality. Afal pi sheba'atzma hi zakav elyon, even though itself is pure and lofty. When it gets put in a body, it becomes entangled. The soul becomes pushed away, far away from its natural source, or its natural state, to something which is the opposite. So here we have a soul which wants to cleave to Hashem, and we mentioned that physicality is the farthest thing away from Hashem. So we have this soul which wants to cleave to Hashem that gets put into a body which is the opposite. And it's like suppressed there. The soul is suppressed in the body. And it can only express itself if with a lot of strength and a lot of work with that. And since Hashem decreed that the body and soul will be together forever, like we explained earlier, that death is only a short separation between the body and the soul, because after Trias Amesim, after the resurrection of the dead, the body and the soul will reunite, and together they're going to get the reward. And they're both going to be together forever. Okay, before that, right, we mentioned earlier also that when the soul if it was allowed to fully express itself, when Hashem put a soul in a body, the soul would just right away purify the body and elevate the body into a spiritual existence. But since Hashem wanted there to be free will for human beings, he made a gzera that the soul is going to be suppressed into the body and will not be able to practically express itself completely. Okay? So therefore, we have to strengthen the neshama. And that will, and use that, and it will weaken the strength of the darkness and the physicality. Until the body will not be dark, have that darkness anymore. And what will be, again, this is after Tchias HaMesim, because then that Gezerah doesn't apply anymore, that what originally was full of darkness and cloudiness and non-clarity, the body, when the soul re-enters it, that will purify it, and what was originally a very lowly thing will be a very lofty thing. Ve'ulam, ha'adam ba'olam hazeh, this is what we mentioned before, hu b'matzav echad she'achomer chazak bo k'mo she'zacharnu. However, in this world, that's an olam haba. When the soul enters the body, and sorry, not olam haba, after Tchias HaMesim, when the soul enters the body, then the soul will purify the body, and it will be, even the body will be on very lofty levels, but not in olam hazeh. Olam hazeh, like we mentioned, this world that we're currently in, the body is the primary, and physicality is the primary force. And the fact that the body is dark and cloudy, man finds himself in great darkness, and man is very far from what he is fit to be. To cleave to Hashem. We are very far from the ideal, which is to cling to Hashem. But for this we need to put in effort to strengthen our neshama against our bodies, and to better our situation, so that we can go up in the to the sheer, the level which is befitting. And he's gonna say, somewhere he says it, or we already said it, that when we do mitzvahs, which he's going to describe, right? He hasn't described how one strengthens the soul, how one strengthens the neshama, but the way to do that is the mitzvahs, and he's going to discuss how that affects the soul. But when one does spiritual things, he strengthens the soul. However, we still have that gezerah, that rule that Hashem made, that the soul will never totally overpower the body in this world. But however, it creates this potential energy and into the soul, and makes the soul on a loftier level, that when it's returned after Tchias HaMesim, it will purify the body, and someone who has more mitzvahs and worked more in spirituality will become purified at a higher level than someone who did not do that. Okay. Any questions so far? Or comments? Rebuttals? Okay. If you're shy, you can text them to me in the chat. Open the chat. But just don't, if you're shy, don't send it to everyone. You send it to me. So, because that would defeat the purpose. Okay, Gimel. So that was man's composition, right? He said we're talking about two topics in this chapter. One is man's composition, and the next is the composition of the place where we find ourselves. So that's what we discussed with man, that in this world, the dominant force is the physical. And the place where we find ourselves, it's also physical and dark. And everything here is physical. And what man does in this world is also physical. Since it's physical and bodily, right? We all have physical bodies, and we're in a physical world, so that means most of what we do is physical. And man's composition in and of itself forces him to do this. It's impossible for a person to exist without eating, drinking, and all other natural things. It's impossible that he lives without possessions, right? A person needs a house, shelter, and ways to reach it. V'nimtza shebein mitzad gufo shel adam, bein mitzad olamo, bein mitzad isko, v'hu tavua b'chaymer mushka b'chashko. So it comes out that when we described man independently, man is primarily physical, and the place, not only man, but the place he finds himself in is also primarily physical. So he is totally, almost like drowning in darkness. He says drowning in darkness. V'amol gadol, it takes a lot of effort, v'hishtadlus chazaka, and a lot of perseverance. Yitztarach l'halos al matzav zach mizeh, to come out purified from this. V'hu muchrach b'tivo be'inyanim achamrim ha'ele. But nevertheless, he has to be involved with physical things, right? We believe, Jews believe, that the way we sanctify ourselves is by following certain rules and sanctifying the physical. We don't believe in that one has to one should not totally separate himself from the physical, right? In certain religions, they praise abstaining from every single physical pleasure, and like we said, fasting for a long time, living in the desert away from people. That is not what Judaism teaches. We live in a physical world. The idea is how we use it. One second. Right, he brings here, Rabbi Naaman cites from Das Tvunos, another famous sefer from the Ramchal, that it's obvious that man wasn't created just for his physical existence, but that there's a spiritual component to man, because man wouldn't have been created with such potential for wisdom and to contemplate, esoteric ideas, and with such an intellect. It's obvious that intellect isn't meant to be used just for physical needs, but something greater. I think Rabbi Feldman said this, and he writes something similar in the beginning of the Juggler and the King, which if you haven't read it, it's a must. You have to read the Juggler and the King. It's a lot of basic ideas in Judaism, but he said that if you look at every animal has the exact intellect that it needs to survive. All right, a dog has the instincts to find food, to run from predators. The lion knows how to kill a zebra and how to mate and whatever. Human beings are the only, so every animal has the intellect required to live according to its purpose. However, human beings are the only being which exists that has an intellect which seems to be beyond what's needed for its survival. So he writes, though, Rabbi Feldman mentioned, if I'm misquoting him, it's my fault, that's because a human being does have the mind that's needed for its purpose, because a human being's purpose is to live for spirituality and to recognize Hashem. So we were given intellect that allows us to live for spiritual purposes, to study Torah, to recognize that there's one God and that He demands certain things of us, to act in a holy way, and to live for higher spiritual levels. And there's I think it's a Mishnah in Avos. It says Nezem Zav Ba'af Chazir. I forgot what someone who doesn't learn Torah is called a Nazif, and it stands for Nezem Zav Ba'af Chazir, which is like somebody who puts like a gold ring in his pig's nose. What does a pig do? The owner wants to beautify his pig, so he gives him a golden ring in his nose. So what does the pig do with it? It uses it to go into the mud and just dig deeper and deeper, so it could dig a bigger hole in the mud. That's what a pig uses a golden ring in its nose for. So too, Hashem gave us a mind, an intellect. We're very, we can contemplate deep philosophical ideas and different things like that. But some people, unfortunately, use their mind to just, be mahadir in the physical. They are, as if their physical taivas weren't enough, as people's physical taivas weren't enough, they use their minds to think of more physical taivas, to think of more ways that they can satisfy their physical pleasures. So that's like a pig who uses this golden ring, this beautiful golden ring. Unfortunately, some people use that to go more into the physical instead of using it for spirituality. But again, human beings, every animal, every creature on earth was created just what it needs to survive. So the lion, the cat, the dog, they all have exactly what they need to eat and to hunt prey and to run from predators. But the human being has this mind that can contemplate, because our purpose isn't just for the physical. Our purpose is to recognize Hashem, recognize that there's a God who gave us a Torah, who wants us to live for spirituality, to live beyond the physical. Okay, any questions? Quiet. Okay. Okay, let's you want to go on a little bit? Is that okay? If anyone has to go, don't feel like you have to stay. I mean, everyone's like a dark screen, so it could be everyone sleeping for all I know anyway, except for 2 people. But okay, so we're on Daled. What? Is that a... No, okay, not a question. Hashem made it through his chachma. Even though that a person has to be totally involved in this physicality. Like we already mentioned, that even though a person is in the physicality, he can use the physicality. Hashem made it that he uses the physicality to get perfection and to elevate himself to a pure and high level. On the contrary, his going down is his going up. And from that he'll acquire glory and that there's nothing like. By turning that darkness to light. One second, I just have to do something. Okay. So again, we're even though we're in this total physical world, and seemingly, as he said, we're drowned in the physical, and we have this soul which wants to cleave to Hashem. So how does the soul cleave to Hashem? How do we serve Hashem? Not like some totally separate thing, not by fasting and living in a desert like we mentioned, but rather using that darkness, using the physical and sanctifying it, and that which is actually the lowliness we turn into the elevation. Hashem put in this physical world procedures and limits for people. The way you have to use the world. Hashem made certain rules. He put you in a physical world, and he told you these are the rules of how to use that physical world. That when the way a person uses it. But also hagvulos v'osam astarim, but also hakavana should see v'aboris baruch shmo. Ya also hapoil agufani v'chamri atzmo poil shlemus. And by following those regulations which God put in the physical world, that will make a person complete. And through that, he will acquire for himself completeness and a very lofty level. And will go up from his lowly level, and become very high. Hashem knows and took into account, when Hashem made these rules, he took into account all the shortcomings in people, that are naturally in people, and all of the things that are required for a person to cleave to Hashem, to cleave to him. And based on that, he made the rules. We'll explain this in a second. And made boundaries. That when one keeps them, that he'll get totally to all the levels, the high levels that are needed. And when he goes away from all the things that will take him away from this dvekus. So Hashem created man, so he obviously knows the different parts of man, that there are certain things that man requires that there be a tikkun, there be a rectification for him to come close to Hashem. That's the way human beings were made. So Hashem made the rules, meaning the mitzvahs based on that, right? Hashem didn't make, like there's 613 rules. When you follow them, you get a check mark, and if you don't follow them, you get a X. That's not how it works. But rather, we're gonna talk about how each mitzvah, there are 613 commandments, and there are 613 parts of the body. And each part of the body corresponds to a certain mitzvah, and each mitzvah has a tikkun, has an effect, a spiritual effect on a human being, which makes him come closer to Hashem. So sitting in a sukkah has a different spiritual effect than blowing a shofar. Saying Shema has a different spiritual effect than putting on tefillin. each mitzvah has a different aspect which rectifies a person, and when he does that, that enables him to come closer to Hashem. And the same thing is for the negative commandments. By not violating the negative commandments, one fulfills, when one has a desire to violate a negative commandment and he doesn't, he fulfills the positive mitzvah of fearing Hashem. But if someone violates those negative commandments, that will distance somebody from Hashem. Okay, let's just finish this section. Now, if Hashem never made a decree that a person dies, right? We said that after Adam's sin, that's when God made a decree that human beings have to die, right? Death and taxes. Because through these deeds, the neshama would be strengthened, and the body would weaken. That the body would totally be purified from the soul. And they would both cleave to Hashem. The body and soul would both cleave to Hashem. But since Hashem made a law, made a decree, it doesn't happen at one time. Oh, this is what we mentioned before. I'll translate in a second. If Hashem would have made a law, would not have made a decree that human beings would have to die, as a person would do mitzvahs that would practically strengthen the neshama until the point that the neshama would totally purify the body. So a person would, if he did mitzvahs and he's constantly doing mitzvahs, then his body would become totally purified and his body and soul would totally cleave to Hashem. But since Hashem made a decree that a human being has to die, that purification doesn't happen until after Tchias HaMesim, after the resurrection of the dead, and the soul is reinserted into the body without that decree. At that point, that's when the soul will purify the body. And Rabbi Naaman, just what we were talking about before, mentions in the bottom that by not violating the negative commandments, a person removes the shortcomings that would distance him from Hashem. One second, let me just see something. It's interesting. He says, you would think that if a person violates one of the negative commandments in the Torah, we have two types of commandments, 248 positive commandments and 365 negative commandments. So he says one would think that if you don't violate the negative commandments, you're parv, right? You didn't do anything wrong, right? You don't rob a bank, you don't go to jail. So I didn't rob a bank, so I'm not going to jail. But the Ramchal says it's more than that. By not violating the negative commandments, you actually remove shortcomings. So by me not robbing a bank, I'm actually, in addition to me not getting punished of going to jail, I'm also getting a shortcoming removed, which is very interesting. So I wonder, is that only, I'm thinking out loud, if anyone has any opinions on this, is that only if you have the desire to do a sin and you don't do it? Or even now, I'll be honest, I don't have a desire right now to rob a bank. So am I getting something Kabbalistically now because I'm not robbing a bank? And I'm, I don't know how, or I'm not murdering somebody, okay? Well, I don't have a desire, or is it only I had a desire to murder somebody? He cut me off on the road, and I didn't do it. So I don't know. I'm just speaking out loud. I'm not really sure, but I think we'll stop here for today. But if anyone has any questions, more than happy to, or comments also, if anyone wants to discuss. It was very very good last week. Someone mentioned the Rambam and Baruch Hashem, Lahagil Torah Lahadir. Okay, everyone's shy this week. Thanks for coming. And thank you